Welcome to the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. This is the place to learn how to make a big impact in your community through grant writing and nonprofit consulting. The world needs you to step forward as a grant writer and use your skills to lead with confidence. I'm Teresa Huff, former special ed teacher turned grant writer and nonprofit strategist. In my 20 years of freelancing, I've helped nonprofits triple their funding and exponentially increase their reach. Now I'm stepping up to mentor freelancers and nonprofit leaders like you who are ready to take your skills to the next level. It's time to get intentional about your vision so you can create lasting change in your community. Learn the skills and strategies you need to become the grant writer the world needs. Let's do this. Welcome and thank you for joining me today. Last week on the podcast, we talked about 9 ways that you can recharge if you're feeling overwhelmed from wearing all the hats in your nonprofit. I've heard that so much from conferences I've been to, roundtables, conversations I've had with nonprofit leaders, and they are really feeling the pressure. So make sure you go back and listen to that, episode 84, if you haven't yet. Today, we're going to talk about a different kind of overwhelm, and that is the overwhelm of trying to figure out where do I start and what is next for me. That decision making can be so difficult when you're trying to sort out what's next. And I've been there. I know it's hard when you really don't know what to do next and there doesn't seem to be a clear path forward. The most common question I hear from people wanting to get into grant writing is, where do I start? And it breaks my heart because I even hear this from people who say, I've read the books, I've taken the courses, and I still don't know where to start. So that's why I started the podcast. That's why I started the Fast Track to Grant Writer, the programs I have to help you make that bridge much shorter and much faster, because it's probably a lot closer than you think. We tend to build things up in our heads and make them way harder than they need to be, especially when there's not a clear answer or when there are so many options. I'm the type of personality, I like to see all the options, lay them out, and then I can make a decision. But sometimes, because I do think through and analyze all those options, and that can actually be paralyzing, I need to just pick one and move forward. And so because of that, there can be a lot of unknowns, and that spills over into our decision making, and that can cloud our judgment. A lack of clarity can really hinder our thinking and our decision making process. I've said this many times on the show, and I'll keep saying it, but action brings clarity. And sometimes you just need to start taking that action, step by step, little by little. And just one small action can start lifting the fog and start bringing more and more clarity, because it really does have a compounding effect. Emily P. Freeman talks about this in her book, The Next Right Thing. She says, without a name, we can't be specific. There is power in naming the unnamed things. And I have to agree with this, because if you're dealing with a general feeling of overwhelm and you just can't seem to move forward with making a decision, start with naming. Sometimes that is a clue that you need to step back and figure out what's going on here, because by naming it, then you know what you have to work with. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed by the thought of starting your freelance grant writing career, and therefore you're not doing anything. You're kind of paralyzed. So you're just sitting there, well, I don't know what to do, and you're afraid to move forward. But when you start digging into that, maybe you're afraid. So, okay, let's name that. What are you really afraid of? I'm afraid I won't get a grant. I'm afraid I won't find a client. I'm afraid I won't know where to start. I'm afraid I'll write it and not know what I'm doing, and everybody will see that I'm this big imposter. What is it that you're really afraid of? Then by pinpointing that and saying, well, I'm afraid if I talk to a client, I'll sound ridiculous. Okay, now you've named that. The client piece is what's hanging you up. You feel good about the grant writing, you feel good about your skills, but it's just that one thing. We can fix that one thing. I can give you the tools, I can give you the coaching to help you with that. And all these different things that I hear, I've incorporated all those into the Fast Track to Grant Writer That's exactly what we work on because I know I've been there and I know those are the things that are tripping people up and causing them to hold back when really we need to be out there making a difference in the world. But naming the thing, really dig in. If you're feeling confused or overwhelmed about a decision, you just don't know a path forward, dig in, really sit with it, and start by naming it. That can go a long way in helping you determine your next right step. That way, instead of this ambiguous, oh, I don't know where to start as a grant writer, then you have this one piece that, okay, this one thing is kind of holding me back. And maybe that's an irrational fear. Maybe that's a legitimate concern. Maybe that is something that you can address and fix or learn or do or define. Maybe you need to get your LinkedIn profile in shape and that's the only thing holding you back. Whatever it is, name it. Then you can start moving forward and start taking action. And what did we say? Action brings clarity. A part of this overwhelm is balancing the short-term and immediate or urgent needs with longer-term capacity building activities. And especially in our careers, in nonprofit work, in building up an organization, we have to keep the balance of these two things in mind because there are always going to be urgent things coming up that have to be dealt with. A bill has to be paid. An emergency situation needs to be addressed. But at the same time, we need to understand our long-term goals and keep those in mind so that we can balance our current immediate decisions in the context of that long-term capacity building vision. Back in episode 24, I talked about decision fatigue and how this can really impact nonprofit leaders. We talked about it in the context of leadership and how that decision fatigue can really wear us down if we don't recognize and name and address it. Go back and listen to that one if you need some encouragement and some advice around that of how to move forward. Now, sometimes part of the overwhelm is a lack of good systems or a lack of processes and knowing how to do something. But once you've learned and done it a few times, then you can set up a system or a checklist or a way to simplify and maybe realize, okay, all these parts and complicated steps are not necessary, but we could simplify this and bring it down to make it more doable and user-friendly for our team. In episodes 62 and 63, I talk about different systems and why it's important to invest time and sometimes resources or money in developing good systems, and not for the sake of systems themselves. We don't want to get into shiny object syndrome that is so easy to do, so easy to get caught up in. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about choosing and investing in the right systems for the sake of clarity and simplicity for yourself, for your team if you have one, for the nonprofit, the board, as a whole. Again, back to that long-term capacity building. By taking the time to invest in systems, you're helping minimize overwhelm. You're investing in the long-term health of your organization or your grant writing career. And by balancing these two, our goal is to keep things running and running as smoothly as possible, yet in the context of a visionary perspective, keeping that long-term goal or vision in mind. First, it starts with naming. What is it that has you overwhelmed? And really dig in and try to define that. Then the next step starts with making sure you have really good core clarity. And by that, I mean a couple of things. Number one, it starts with your personal why. That could be you as the grant writer. That could be each board member. That could be each staff member in your organization, each volunteer. Each person needs a personal why of why they're there. And again, dig in and really name it. Dig deeper and keep going until you really get to the deeper motivating why. And then the second part of that is really getting clear on your vision and then your mission and then your core values. And that's again personally and also at the organizational level. The reason that's so important is because then that becomes a filter for your decision making. That becomes the foundation for your drive and your motivation. That helps bring clarity. Naming the thing get your core clarity in place, and then get your organizational clarity in place. Then you have those as the foundation for other things that come through that you can filter. Now, if you're wanting some super practical ways to get started with this, with your grant writing career, I really encourage you to go back and listen to the Fast Focus Power series in episodes 43 through 46. Those are workshop-style episodes where I walk you step by step through how to sort some of this out, some of your why, some of your skills, some of the things you really need to start with in order to gain clarity. So if you are feeling overwhelmed as far as your career in grant writing goes, go back and make sure you listen to those. Even if you've already listened, go back and listen again and go through the workbook that goes along with that. The other tool I have for you is the free quiz, Do You Have What It Takes to Be a Grant Writer? This just takes you step by step through some of the skills to see where you are. That's at teresahuff.com/quiz, and that will help you sort out your next steps. Now, if you're on the nonprofit side of things and looking at this from the organizational level, I really encourage you to sit down with this and think through, what do you need to name? It can seem overwhelming. You're wearing all the hats, doing all the things, all the issues are hitting you at once. But just take a minute and sit down and see, what can you name? What can you define and quantify? Then that will help you figure out, what are we working with here? What are we trying to solve? And how can we move forward? And then make sure you have your personal why really deep, clearly defined, that is just driving you forward. And then make sure at a deeper level you have your vision, your mission, and your core values. Now, if you're a nonprofit trying to sort this out, go through the free audit at teresahuff.com/grant-ready. And that will help you think through some of the basics of getting ready for grants, but also just having a healthy nonprofit. Do we have some of these key elements in place? And if not, that doesn't mean you're terrible or you're not doing your job. It's just information. You've named it. You've named the areas where you're strong. You've named the areas that you need to work on or develop or strengthen. Now you know what you need to work on, instead of this ambiguous, oh no, we're kind of a mess, we really need to get grants, but we don't know where to start. Let's start with naming. Go take the audit, teresahuff.com/grant-ready, and I'll help you figure out, what is it that you need to work on next. And don't forget, if you are wanting to jumpstart your grant writing career, head over to teresahuff.com/VIP and get on the fast track to grant writer. I'll help you develop a personalized plan based on your goals and skills. We'll name those things and define them and help you move forward so you can launch your grant writing career to help more nonprofits. I want to give a shout out again to today's sponsor, Instrumental, for their support of grant writers in our work. They are helping us make a big difference in the world. All right, I want to end with a challenge question. What's an area that you're feeling overwhelmed today? And what can you name that will help you be more specific so you can move forward in your work? Send me a message anytime on LinkedIn or on my website contact form. I love hearing from you all and how this is helping you. If this was helpful, would you please share it with a friend and leave a review so that others can hear about this and we can encourage them to do their work more effectively too. All right, my friends, keep at it. Push through the overwhelm, and action brings clarity. The world needs you out there, step by step, every day. Have a great week and go change your world.